Post-traumatic stress disorder impacts thousands of veterans, effects that can be felt years after soldiers return home. News 2's Cuthbert Langley takes a deeper look at the challenges of the disorder in part one of what we are calling Wounds of War.
I still have dreams about it. I mean, I can remember as clear today as when it happened.
For Michael Johnson, the day, the sounds, and the sights of Iraq will forever be seared in his mind.
Shortly after we fired on the vehicle, we found the husband and wife had been killed, and the three little girls that were in the back, different ages, two of them were dead on sight.
Johnson was part of the 101st Airborne Division, some of the first troops in Iraq after President Bush called for war. The military had been his life. From Bosnia to Iraq, Johnson served in the military for 10 years until a knee injury brought him home. It was at home when the ghost of war started haunting him and his family.
I probably noticed something about 6 months after I got back, and then just like any other soldier, I was like, nah, not me. Kind of just kept pushing through it. It was just, yeah, a lot of anger, a lot of irritability, a lot of lashing out. Definitely no patience with the kids, no patience with my wife.
Johnson is like the 20% of other veterans who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan who have post-traumatic stress disorder. After 2 years of fighting the symptoms and not knowing he had PTSD, Johnson came to the Ralph Johnson VA Hospital in downtown Charleston to begin finding out what was wrong.
There are a number of challenges to kind of getting a good sense of whether the person is experiencing PTSD.
Dr. Brian Lozano is a clinical psychologist at the VA who admits that diagnosing veterans with PTSD is a hard thing to do. But in the last few years, more research has shed more light on which symptoms make up the disorder.
We do have a cluster of symptoms that we specifically look for, and through assessment, getting to know a good history of what the person has experienced, we can really get a better picture.
After deciding he did have PTSD, Johnson and his doctors began a 10-week treatment known as prolonged exposure.
They basically, let's pick out a part that bothers you and what's keeping you up at night. And you start from the very time that action started to the very time that it stopped.
After months of grueling therapy, Johnson was able to see a difference.
Oh, it sucked. I mean, I can tell you right now, I hated every minute of it. And but after, I'd say week 9, I was getting more comfortable with it. I was getting more daring.
Before getting treatment, Johnson couldn't drive, couldn't go to movies or stores or spend time with his family. In his darkest days, he even thought he couldn't live. Was suicide ever, did that ever cross your mind?
Yeah, I think it crossed it a couple times. I mean, I can say that I probably would never go through with it, but I can say that it's readily there. It's always, you know, it's in the back of my mind.
In fact, the number of veterans committing suicide hit record numbers last year. According to the Department of Veterans Affairs, around 22 veterans take their own lives every day. 31% of those suicides happen to veterans around Johnson's age. 69% are those who are older than 50. Veterans aren't the only ones who need support when it comes to PTSD. Coming up a little later in the show and in part 2 of this series, I'll tell you about the support groups available to help families cope with post-traumatic stress. Reporting in the studio, I'm Cuthbert Langley, News 2.
And straight ahead on News.
Thank you for staying with us. You know, earlier in the show, we introduced you to Sergeant Michael Johnson. He was one of the first soldiers on the ground during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and after coming home, he was diagnosed with PTSD. But Johnson and other veterans aren't the only ones affected by post-traumatic stress. News 2's Cuthbert Langley shows us the support system in place for veterans and their families. It's part 2 of Wounds of War.
When you do the group, everybody helps everyone.
Frank Rue started the Veterans, Family, and Friends PTSD support group in Somerville. His mission? To help not only the veteran, but all in his or her life understand what it's like to suffer from PTSD. You know, how do you think your group saves people?
Well, I think number one is the feeling of I'm not alone.
This veteran who wishes to remain anonymous is part of Ruth's group. Life was good until one of his good friends' helicopter went down.
He said, I think I'm overloaded. And I went through his numbers again. And I said, no, Dale, I think you're good. And he took off. The next thing I knew, he was dead and 8 Marines were dead.
After waiting years to receive treatment, he now joins the group almost weekly. For him, it's a matter of life or death for the veterans, especially for those whose families don't understand the disorder.
They don't want to admit that they're having problems, so they eat a pistol. We need to do a better job reaching out to the vets. We need to do a better job of reaching out to the families and letting them explain what's going on with the vet.
That's why Michael Johnson is sharing his story and his struggles with PTSD. Months removed from treatment, Johnson is once again living life with his family. And while he says he will never be cured, he will always be progressing.
Now, I do all kinds of things with my kids. I take them out as much as I can. We go out and do stuff. I mean, it's definitely one of those life-changing events that when you see everything starting to progress.
If you or someone you know is interested in attending the Veterans Family and Friends PTSD group, here is some useful information. The group meets every Monday at 7 p.m. at 1400 Old Trolley Road. That's the Fellowship of Oak Brook Church in Somerville. You don't have to give your name or any information. The group is anonymous. Reporting in the studio, I'm Cuthbert Langley, News 2.